Welcome back to the lab. Right, a thing has happened. The Gloria, it's outside, and the Ute, that's inside. So I mentioned something about changing the engine in the Ute. I think I'm going to get on with that. This could be a disaster. It's not very well planned. I know there's a couple of things I need to buy. There's a couple of other things I might need to buy that I'm thinking I need, but I haven't confirmed. But I will confirm when I take it to pieces. And it's Thursday. And by the time I get it to pieces, it'll be Friday. Not all of the parts. I won't see them until Tuesday. So, welcome to New Zealand. But looks quite cool, doesn't it? Quite shiny and everything. It's a good looking Ute. But anyway, so we've got, as you've seen, we've got motor virtually ready to go under here. There's a few things that need to be transferred across from other engine onto this engine. The hardest one I'm aware of at this point in time is going to be the map sensor. Just needs to be drilled and tapped into this manifold. That's easy enough to do. I just don't know what size the thread is until I pull the other one out. Couldn't be bothered pulling it out in the Ute and putting it back together. So let's get the Ute on the hoist. Big Ute, small garage. It's not going to be easy. When I put that in there, when I built it, I had a little bit more working space than what we've got here. So this should be fun and games. Okay, so we didn't get very far into the job. Here's a VK45 DE throttle. It's about, I think that's 75mm ID, something like that. That's what I measured. And there's a VK45 DD throttle. And if I flip that over so it's the same way, you should be able to see some differences between the two of them. And don't worry about the fact that that one looks really, really large. It's just closer to the camera. If I shift the camera, it's not such an obvious difference. The bolt holes are a different pattern. That won't bolt on where that bolts on. And this one's got a smashed off plug, but it's got a long skinny plug. That one's got a short fat plug. So yeah, my throttle that's all set up for the ECU and the harness and everything on this motor is not simply going to bolt up to the other one. So I need to make an adapter plate. It's probably the best way around it. That is a slightly bigger throttle. If we were going for absolute peak horsepower, this one would be the way to use, way to go. With this type, not this one, because this one is stuffed. But yeah, so now I've got to look at making a adapter plate. It's probably just as well that I checked that. That was literally the first thing I checked. Took the negative terminal off the battery. Right, let's have a look at the throttle. Bum, bum, bum. So we're probably not pulling the motor out of this thing today, because I'll run out of time to get that done, I'd say. Alright, so I'll make up my mind what I'm going to do with that throttle situation shortly. I might actually just buy a new throttle. It's 350 bucks or something retail for a second handy for it. So here's under this this slammed Navara Ute. So lower suspension arms stock, sway bar stock, knuckle stock, brake stock. Actually nothing is changed in here except we've got some Dobie lowered springs with one loop cut off the bottom of them and a shortened standard shock absorber. Then we have a an oil leak, a significant oil leak. This thing's actually leaking all over the show. That's probably the smallest one just there is where that bolt is. But it's got a leak somewhere in the, I'm not sure if we're even going to be able to see it. Where are we? In here in the front of the engine there somewhere. Leakies. And then just generally everything on this side. This is one of the reasons, you know, after 5 years, it's it doesn't take a lot of much of a leak to make a great big mess. So it has been cleaned up a couple of times, but we've got a leaky rocker cover on this side, and that's dripping all the way down and onto the bell housing and everything. She's all pretty gross. Nothing's going to rust in here because we've got leaky everywhere. This was all 2-pot bloody shiny paint when I built all this. So what we've got that's different from factory is a cross brace tying in that front subframe brace there and the gearbox cross member. That gives it a bit of strength.
These rails are completely manufactured from this point here. They're spliced into the original front suspension assembly. You see it does bottom out from time to time. It's pretty clean where the bump stops go. Custom rails all the way through to the back to the last foot. I'll show you that in a second. 2.5 inch stainless steel exhaust all the way through. That is a standard 2-wheel drive Navara 6-speed gearbox, mounted on a 300ZX transmission mount to give us better clearance, lower profile, and cut and spliced the VK45DE bell housing onto the front of that. Not the ideal way to do it, wouldn't recommend it. If I was doing this project again today, that would not be happening. I'd put an adapter plate in between the two. It has got a packer due to some things that were going on, so we could have actually had, you can see a steel packer there, we could have actually had an adapter plate in there for the space that we've used. Stock drive shaft, just modified a little bit. And then the end, let's see if we can we get some light in here? That's the way to do it. That might work. 300ZX TT diff in the back here. It's probably easier just to show you from here. So that's got some adapters just here that I've made up to adapt that to fit into our R51 Pathfinder IRS all the way through there. Dobie springs, not modified on the back, they're just as they were. Chassis notched a little bit up there and reinforced just to get the profile right, the height. And that weld you see there, that's splicing in the last foot or so, let's call it 2 feet, of the original factory chassis. So we had a nice spare tyre mount, didn't have to remake one of those. And the mounts for the drawbar on the back here, the tow bar, which looks like it needs some paint. It's had a hard life, all the paint's come off it. She's done, I don't know, like 40,000 Ks or something. Big aluminium panel under here to protect the fuel tank. I'll put some holes in it to get a bit of airflow circulating through there, because the exhaust system, sorry about the shadow, the exhaust system that you can see there, everything's so dirty on this now. It's quite close to the fuel tank. That's the fuel tank you can see through the panel. So there's a bit of heat soaks into that. So after a long drive, like 2 or 3 hours or more, the fuel pump, which is up here, starts to get a bit noisy because the fuel starts getting quite warm. But it's not a big deal. The side skirts, a lot of people ask about the side skirts. So there you go. They're just folded aluminium and they just tuck in. They overlap on the top and they just tuck in behind the pinch weld on the factory cab. So there's no no sealant, no screws, nothing like that holding that on. It just clips into place. Drive shaft hoop. Where is it? There's one there. Mandatory in New Zealand when you modify things. There's another one. You can see the bolts holding it there. That's welded onto this. There's a cross member that runs behind here, behind this panel that I welded on there. Bolted on, welded edge. So there you go. That's a lot of people have asked for more details and see more of this thing. Clutch is a little bit of a nightmare on this. I should have gone for a concentric slave. I probably could do that while it's all in pieces. You'll see that that's actually completely and utterly 100% run out of travel. So a little bit of something needs to be done there. Ran out of room for our slave cylinder because that's exactly where they've put the crank angle sensor on the VK45DD, because Nissan seemed to use blueprints and just put things in certain spots, and just so happened that they put the slave cylinder in the same spot as the crank angle sensor, which is a nuisance. So that can be tweaked somehow. How am I going to fix that? I need to think. I'll figure that out while it's all in pieces. Alright, so that was a bit of a disaster. That kind of ground to a halt. Never mind. I do have a suitable piece of material. I believe that's actually stolen from the Gloria. That was to hold the dry sump pump, but that's alright. You won't miss it. I'll give them $10 for credit. Something like that. But that is that's sufficient to fit both throttles even across there. Certainly no problem going along there. The issue we've got, I'll draw it on the whiteboard that's got a list of all sorts of things that we need to be doing. So as I said, one throttle's 70mm diameter and the other's 75, so we're only talking 2.5mm here. That's no biggie. It's not going to make much difference on power, if anything at all. Hole locations, one's quite a bit smaller PCD, I guess you'd call it, than the other one, but they clash like that, so making an adapter and having it sitting square is actually pretty much not going to happen. That's going to be an issue, but there's no reason why we can't just clock it around just a tiny little bit like that. So we just end up that the throttle won't sit square on the car, on the engine. That's no biggie at all. No problem whatsoever. So I've gone ahead and ordered some bits and pieces. This is a deadhead fuel system, which means it's basically just one line comes into it. There's no return, as you can see. There's the rail, there's no fitting on the end of that. There's the other fuel rail. Of course, we can use the factory fuel rails on this one. I don't have to custom make anything. So what I'll do is I'll cut this off and I'll get a flare nut arrangement tube adapter that goes on there to a AN6 male fitting. Put our 90-degree hose end on that like that. Hose can disappear off over there. Like, as conveniently as brackets all around the place to use to hold the hose. Around the back here somewhere, out of the way, heaps and heaps of room all through here. So I'll put a T arrangement here and have the hose disappear off to the regulator. I'll come back over here to the whiteboard and you guys can all figure that out. It's pretty easy. That can disappear. Normally you've got fuel tank, fuel pump. There'll be a check valve inside the pump normally. Probably isn't on my arrangement. Doesn't matter too much. Filter, and that'll come up into the engine bay. It'll go in one rail, or yeah, a single rail, doesn't matter. In one rail across to the other one, out the other side, and you come to your fuel pressure regulator, and then you return it into the fuel tank. Ta-da! That's it. Hey, looks like a monster with square wheels. Anyway, so all I'll do to sort this out, because we don't have the return, is I'll just tee it like that, and this goes away. And that's the same, effectively the same system. It just means the fuel doesn't flow right through the rails and then come out, but that will still have pressure, and anything that needs to flow into the rails as such we'll do it. So that's all right. That's arranged. We'll get on with that later on. Under here, no heaters on there at the moment, because fortunately the way I've built this with that mount there, I can put the exhaust system on and get things sorted out. Organised a fitting to go onto here with a banjo bolt, and then we'll run the clutch hose down here, under here, up the other side, and onto, I can't show you, it'll crash the gimbal, beyond that hose. There it is, we can see it right where the end of my finger is the fitting on the end of the clutch master cylinder. So I've checked the clutch master cylinder size. While I'm yarning in, what is it? Look at that. Oh, look at that. And fortunately, Nissan really good. That's 5/8 size master cylinder, clutch master cylinder. And that is the same as what they use on the 350Z. And that slave cylinder inside here, that is a 350Z one. That's a 350Z gearbox. Well, actually, it's the Skyline gearbox, but same. So the clutch feel, the pedal travel and all that will be the same as what it is from the factory in a 350Z. So that's good. Pays to check on those things, because if you get that wrong, it's a pain in the ass sorting it out later on. So just a couple of tweaks happened underneath here. This is why I've got the exhaust back on. This, what are we going to call this? The stiffening rib, or whatever, that runs through the floor. It was just a bit close to the exhaust system through here. So I've modified that. I've basically put a slot in it, flattened it out a little bit, and then welded it back up again. This welding that you see around here is the base for the seat. So that particular piece of the floor pan that I've just modified inside here doesn't actually do much anymore anyway. It just keeps the dirt and crap out of the car.
Right, so we've rolled through into Saturday now, Saturday afternoon. Bit of the spaghetti back on the motor. Finishing off all that sort of stuff in there. I've got almost everything done in the engine bay as far as physically wired up. There's no fancy cover on anything yet. It's all just nice and exposed. If we have any dramas trying to start it up or whatever, we can easily trace any faults, see if there's any problems. We'll do all the fancy wrapping, etc. later on. So I've just got a couple more to do. We've actually got 2 air temp sensors on this setup. So there's one that goes on the end of that before it goes into the throttle, and there's another one that's living just down here post intercooler. So I was unsure whether I would hook those up, both of them. I'd just do one normally, but I think I will. I'll run both, and then we can do a comparison. We can see how well that intercooler's coping with what's going on, and then later on down the track, if he decides he wants more horsepower, we'll be able to have a look and see whether the intercooler's keeping up with what's going on. And also use that temp sensor below the intercooler there to run the intercooler pump. It's hiding on the front of the car there. No sense in having that running if you've only got minimal air temp sensors, temperatures. Like if that's, I don't know, 30 degrees C, you'd probably turn it on at that point. Below that, it's absolutely no point. The wire down there, it's going to go down to our oil pressure sensor. There's another coil. Get over there, camera. That's going to go to our fuel pressure sensor, which my fuel pressure regulator lives on these 2 riv nuts on the firewall there. I will stiffen that up a little bit to stop that hammering the firewall, making noise inside the cabin. And these 2 here, these are our CAN bus wires, high and low. They'll probably go the other side of the firewall. I just haven't chucked them through there at this point in time. I'll probably put a Deutsch connector on there so we can maybe use a wideband O2 sensor setup later on if he wants to. The Magic CAN Lambda system, they're awesome. These are our spare wires. So it looks like heaps, but there's actually, I don't know, what's 6 or 7 there. We've actually run out of outputs, unfortunately, by 1 or 2. I would like to, this is our, you print this off out of your instructions and your link, and then you write down everything that you've done so you know what's going on. So when you go to set everything up, fire it all up, you can know what's going on. I'd like to run a output for the lift pump in the boot, and then run the actual fuel pump on a PWM system. We've run out of outputs though, so I'll have to try and figure something out there. Oh my god, look at the mess in here! The boot still works, eh? Like, despite having all this stuff in there, you can still fit quite a lot of stuff in there. You can't actually close the boot at the moment because that box is too high. But a lot of work to go. A lot of work to go. That ECU has actually been fired up, and I think I showed in one of my videos earlier on, I built a little speedo drive box and a motor to go onto the cable to go in the back of the speedo head that's over here, the mechanical speedo head. And where's that? It's on the bench over there. Right there in the middle of the screen, in the distance there, little electric motor. The problem is that works perfectly. We just can't control it with, I was hoping PWM control from the link would do the trick. And even using one of the high frequency ones, you can go from 2 Hertz all the way through to 4,000 Hertz. But the motor just wants to run at 160k an hour. So we can't slow it down. If you run it at 12 volts, you get about 160, 170. You run it at 13 or 14, which would be what the car would be when it's charging. I'll show you, eh? Let's walk over there. It winds it off the clock, so that's fine. And you'd think putting 2 Hertz into it would slow it down enough that you'd get down to 5 or 10 k's an hour, those damn dogs. But it doesn't work. It just goes flat out. So rather than all the dramas, we're looking at
an aftermarket speedo for it. I'll have to excuse the mess on the bench here. See, if I stop talking, the dogs go quiet. Little mongrels. So we're looking at an aftermarket speedo head. Where is the dash? Where is the dash, Glenn? Over here. So we've got, these are the gauges that came with the drift car. So I've used some of those already on here. Made a little panel to go in there. This is the rather awkwardly sized instrument cluster we've got here. We've already got this one tacho, which is quite nice. Will potentially fit in here if we make a nice panel to cover up the original one. A bit of adjustment and a few things. We might be able to bring it down to this line here or something like that. That would work all right. We just need a matching speedometer, and might as well get a fuel gauge as well. And we can take the water temp gauge from here, put that over there, and then we can I think that's oil temp, that one there, so we can put the oil temp one there instead. So yeah, oil pressure, oil temp, boost, water temp, speed, RPM, whichever way around we do that, and fuel. So the owner, I think he doesn't really like these silver and white ones. Or silver, I think they are. Yeah, they're just silver, it's just the reflection. So we might go black, but we'll see. So if anyone wants some gauges, these might be up for sale. Alright, I've had enough for today. This is going to go outside tomorrow. We're going to have a look at Christopher's D22, sort that out, and then this can go back inside. I'll finish it off. That'll be a joke. Carry on with it next week. Kind of hoping I might, if I pull finger, get a first start out of it. So that'll be exciting. Alright, cheers, bye.